Bitcoin only generates prosperity, not despair.
Mhm.
If everyone were to switch to Bitcoin tomorrow, everyone would experience prosperity, not despair.
Yep.
Okay, would the central bank implode? Sure. But would we experience prosperity or despair, which is essentially what we're talking about? We would experience prosperity.
Welcome to the Tucson Bitcoin podcast. Today my guest is Shishi, and I think it's a really important conversation. So Shishi has taken the step of moving towards homesteading and creating his own food, which I think is an incredibly important topic right now as supply chains are just getting completely demolished due to stupid government action. And then also as the food supply is getting ever more consolidated as the government intervenes in markets and just makes it impossible for smaller scale farmers to exist. I just think it's incredibly important that we start making our own food. And this is something that I've been working on and want to be talking about at the local Bitcoin meetups is how do we push back against this just leviathan or awful system, which is government subsidies and interventions in our food supply, and which creates fiat food. So this is something, I'm really passionate about and stoked on. I'm going to be having more people on the podcast going forward on this topic. But yeah, we got into the weeds, and one of the things we talked about later on in the podcast was, how real these narratives, kind of scapegoating people are just really, really destructive. And I've taken kind of a lackadaisical approach to when people in media like to point the finger at Bitcoiners and call us, negative names. And, what ultimately is happening is we're moving into a very dangerous place. And something Shishi brought up and changed my mind on is like, it's not something I can be taking lackadaisically because, bad, really awful things can happen as a result of scapegoating and dehumanization. So that's, also a topic I'm going to be discussing on the podcast in the future is just, we have to dismantle these narratives. Like Bitcoin is not going to be the cause of a financial collapse. It's going to be awful government central planning. It's these maniacs in positions of power that decide that, in a year we can expand the money supply by 40%, or we're going to wage these endless wars and just continue printing and stealing from the lower and middle classes, as well as raising taxes, raising regulations, killing any sort of economic productivity. Like that is the problem, and Bitcoin is the escape hatch. It's the lifeboat in this situation. And so I think that's a narrative that I'm going to try and be more proactive in combating on Twitter and and other places. But yeah, awesome interview with Shishi. I hope you enjoy it. Cool. We're recording. Good to have you on, Shishi.
Hell yeah. Good to be here.
So yeah, the past, 6 months has been really interesting for me, waking up to the importance of localizing food production, or at least that's the way I see it, and kind of getting away from these massive corporations like Tyson and, I don't know what to call it, the agricultural industrial complex might be a good way to put it. But yeah, I'm stoked to kind of pick your mind because you've been on this journey for a little bit longer than I have, working on that. So yeah, what got you into homesteading and that mindset?
Yeah, so like rewind a few years back, maybe like 7 years back, I was coming out of college and I had a finance degree, and I got that just to bide my time, right? And I was offered all these like investment banking jobs. I rejected those because I didn't want to work in an office. Everyone thought I was crazy, but then I decided to travel the world, with just my backpack, a tent and a sleeping bag. I've slept in that tent and that sleeping bag for a year, man. And I just toured different farms, and in between working on farms, I just and literally just working for free. I just wanted to learn. And so in between that, I was traveling the world. And when I was traveling, I would I would seek out other farms even when I was like on vacation. you know. I'd want to like stay on like some eco-tourist thing, or, you know, something to do with food, right? And I traveled for just a full year like that. And then I decided that's what I want to do. And then it just took me time. Like, I'm like, all right, but I need to have like a lot more money if I want to do it in America, you know? And my goal was to accomplish this in the US, because I think here it's like there's a lot of space and there's not enough knowledge that was passed down, you know? But there is the space, right? And there is the people with the means to do so, like the actual means to do so. Because when you're in Africa or whatnot, in sub-Saharan Africa, and you go to these places, like they're already like subsistence farming, right? Like when I was in Uganda and I'm seeing them subsistence farming, like, yeah, they can still deal with some, they have a lot of permaculture tips that they're not using, you know, but they're still counting on this for their life. So they're more inclined to be implementing these things, and they're already doing it, kind of, right? Um, their problem is more like storing water. Our problem here is actually just doing it, right? And so the quality of the food was what really got me. I'm, you know, you go to the supermarket, it's garbage. You live on a farm for 2 months, you're like, wait, this is what a cucumber tastes like. This is what a tomato tastes like. This is what, if you're on a farm that also slaughters their own chickens, animals, whatever, you have the eggs, you have, it all tastes completely different, right? Having real cider, not from a can, like I made my own cider from these special apples in Spain, like amazing, you know, and it's life changing. It just changes your whole mindset of like, oh, like how would a wealthy person 200 years ago look at a wealthy person today living in New York in his little cubicle, you know? I don't, probably like, what the fuck are you doing? Eating you're drinking your government water, eating your government food, and working for your government money. And no matter how much money you have, man, the food and the water quality has just been degrading. It doesn't matter how rich you are, it really doesn't, you know? And then there's this renaissance, the farmers markets, the small farm instead. And I want to be part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of amazing. I think a lot of people lack the context of what food is like outside of the United States. I spent a couple months in Peru, and it was amazing how like my skin just was so different and healthy, and I just felt so healthy eating, the food compared to the US. And when you say it's garbage, I think when people hear food in the US is garbage, they think of all the processed stuff, but they don't also really think about the fruits and vegetables that have been, and the meats that have been so heavily ruined, I guess would be a good word.
Ruined, ruined. And that ruin is just a very simple concoction, right, of chemical plant warfare essentially, and monoculture. So they're taking chemicals to fight diseases and pests, when essentially that should just be integrated into any good system, right? Like nature is pretty smart. With some things there, it's there because you're missing something, not because you need to spray it with chemicals, right? And so, permaculture is just a rabbit hole within of itself, as is Bitcoin, right? And that all ties together for me, like, how do you get away from the non-government version of everything you're doing? And the food is government food for the most part in the supermarkets, because that's where the subsidies are, right? Follow the money, right? So I think that motivates me. I mean, like you said, my skin, when I have mineral water, I have mineral water from the earth, from the mountains, and my skin isn't, dude, you know, it's definitely, I've been here for like over a year. There's definitely a difference, and when I go drink water out, I'm not happy with it. I usually take my water with me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been really fun to watch the Bitcoin community kind of latch on to this mentality. And it seems like, I don't know if it's always been a thing, but for me, becoming aware of it over the past, 6 months or so, it's breaking things back down, to first principles. And like we have everybody focusing on healthcare and, you know, just health in general, from kind of a ridiculous like 911 mentality of like, we need to fix the hospitals and, fix insurance and stuff like that, versus like going back to the basics of like, we need to fix the food so that people can be healthier and have less issues. And
Yeah, I mean, my goals are simple with this stuff. Very simple. I have 2.5 acres. I'm trying to grow a food forest type permaculture, vegetable and fruit garden over here. Um, using all the compost that I make. I'm starting a pretty big worm composting operation to help with that. And my goal is to save as much heirloom seed as I can that makes sense, and create a sort of seed bank and then start trading with people, right? And start creating a community of trade. And I think that's somebody calls it, I forgot who wrote that article, but it's called a mesh tadel, where, everyone's talking about citadels where everyone comes up on one piece of land or whatever and shares it. But I think the mesh tadel is much more obvious, obviously, like a good model that won't implode in your face. So everyone has their own land in some sort of vicinity. We can all trade. And with seeds, I can ship them all over the country or all over the world even, right? So I kind of think that's sort of where I want to be. Untapped growth is with the cattle, Bitcoin and cows. Also the cattle, there's a bunch of people doing the rotational grazing stuff. I don't have enough land to do that. I only have 2.5 acres, but I want to show people that maybe already have the place that they're living in, they don't want to change it, or they just want 2.5 acres and they want to live closer to the city or whatever, right? Because everyone has a different value system or how they want to live their lives. There isn't a cookie cutter, like there isn't like a single Bitcoin vision. There's Bitcoiners and we all address problems, but then there's all the nuance and all your satisfaction that you need for yourself, right? Which is very specific to you, right? Like I'm in North Carolina, you're in Arizona, the other guy's going to be in Texas. And so I think like having mesh tadels where we can all share and trade, that's what I'm really after. And also like these 2.5 acres I'm farming with no machinery, just my hand tools. So wheelbarrows, and it's a no dig and no till system. So I don't need to till my nothing, I don't need any of that stuff. So I'm just building soil from the top down. And I'm doing so with mulch and worm castings, essentially. That's my main 2 ingredients, and grass, cut grass, and then obviously all the biomass from all the vegetables and all the stuff and fruits that I'm growing. And yeah, I basically saved this 2.5 acres because this would have been developed, because it's like the only flat area in the mountains over here. And so this would have been like three more homes. Instead, I like just saved these 2.5 acres, which have been cleared a long time ago. So it was perfectly cleared land already. And so I'm going to bring it back to life by growing trees and different stuff like that, and then, and yeah, so that's just like a little recap of what I'm doing over here. But yeah, it's super important. I think the Bitcoin overlap is one of the most interesting things that I think drew me more to Bitcoin. Like if it didn't have that, like when I first got onto Bitcoin Twitter and became more active, I saw that people were coalescing around untapped growth. And I was really excited to see that because I hadn't seen any other group of people be excited about that. I'll be at a dinner table and people ask me, what am I doing? And I would start telling them, they'll be like, not interested. Talk to a Bitcoiner, dude, you want to talk to me for an hour on your podcast? Like it's like a lot of people want to talk to me for an hour about this stuff, but they're Bitcoiners. It's like 100% overlap almost, because I think the don't trust verify is just ingrained in people who are after the truth. So
yeah, totally. And I love what you said earlier about just opting out from the state as much as possible. Like we don't want the government food. And I think that's huge. The mesh tadel model is super interesting. I'm definitely as interested as possible of like finding different ways to work around the state and opt out. And the idea of like being able to trade with people, like for me and you to potentially be able to trade seeds, or different products is really, really fascinating and powerful. And it seems like Bitcoin is just such a inherent part of doing something like that, which is cool.
Yeah, it's like not only seeds. Like let's say you want to start worm composting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And worms are great because you can feed them to your chickens. You can go fishing with them, right, as bait. Like there's so many you can feed them. There's just, and they also make your compost, right? So it's like this amazing system, right? And so yeah, I'm just trying to trade with people essentially as much as possible that share the same ethos. And what you can, like, I'm crazy about things that come onto the farm. There's 0 industrial products that come onto this farm. I don't even use cardboard. You can see online, gardeners, YouTube, hey, how to start a no-till garden bed. Everyone uses cardboard. I refuse. It's an industrial product. I don't want it in my land. I don't know what they spray on it. I don't know how they make it like that. I can't verify it myself fully, and I don't really care to. I just use wood chips, leaves. I use with grass. I use whatever is here. Then that's real permaculture essentially, right? I get the wood chips delivered to me for free, but that's just because it's convenient for the tree trimmers. And that's one thing to take into account when you do look at your citadel or your homestead. You want to take into account all the variables, because being far away is really great if you have a lot of acres and you have all of the machinery and stuff to like cut down some trees and use the chips, and like, and kind of untapped growth. And Ben Gunn are talking about doing something like that in Texas. And I think that's very commendable. But if you're not the type of person to be part of a citadel with a bunch of people, and you want to have like, just kind of want to be in a mesh citadel where you have your own space, you don't want to commingle all the time with people, then you have to take into account the pros and the cons of being further or closer away, right? Which there's cons of being closer, super big cons, but there's also some pros, right? Like I get all my wood chips for free dumped, and I don't do anything for them. They just come dump them. And I just take them and move them if I need to. But yeah, there's so much good things to happen. And like, I believe that Bitcoin and the ethos around verifying is just going to spread. So the mesh citadel, what happens is you're gonna have like relay points around the country and around the world where it's gonna get closer and closer, those relay points. So maybe me and you are in Arizona right now and there's not much in between us. But as time comes, like we're gonna have like, oh yeah, I got this from Tucson, and now I'll send you some of that because I already he sent me a little too much, and I'll send you, and Shishi's gonna send you like, some crazy fucking, I don't know, some crazy potatoes for you to grow next year or something. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. This is something that, I'm trying to talk more and more about at our local Bitcoin meetups too, is like, how do we start networking together? We're not all on one plot of land, but I think it can happen locally as well. I just see the importance of, building out these strong networks. It's absolutely vital right now because I don't really believe there's such thing as a sovereign individual, but I believe there's sovereign communities, and what it comes down to ultimately is like the division of labor. Like we're not all going to be experts on every single topic.
No,
Yeah.
but we should all be. I think if everyone was trying to grow their own food on some level, it doesn't have to be 100%, right? Just on some level, you're just growing something, right? Um, you never know. You never know what you become an expert at. And I think food and water, like we should be experts in some of the basics of living, right? Like we've outsourced all of our basic needs to the government essentially, right? When you live in a city, you outsource 100% of your needs. There's nothing that you haven't outsourced. Okay. Even your air quality, you've outsourced. Okay. Because, and so that's why I'm telling you, like, one thing that is going to be a more talked about aspect of citadel building and food is going to be where, and not politically. It's going to be where, but ecologically, environmentally, where do I want to be, and why, right? It depends, and that just such fucking depends on each person. There isn't like a utopia spot, but it depends on like what you're after, what your needs are, and what's the most important to you. Where I am, it's one of the most ecologically diverse places in the fucking world, like it's crazy. Like this area is just, it's mind blowing. And so I'm not rebuilding localism from nothing. I'm just plugging into it and expanding it, and I'm helping, and I think that can fit a lot of people as well. And I'm honestly not around too many Bitcoiners, none at all really. But I've been flipping people, right? And so I think that's my mission, is like kind of saying like, hey, let's just dig in here. Like we don't need to point fingers at each other. It's like in my town, like masks, like maybe one person will tell me, I go with no mask for months now, and there is a mandate in North Carolina, in certain places. So I mean, I just see people here as like, there is some upside here I think there's some upside to being in Texas, and there's some upside to being out of Texas, right? It just depends what you're after. Some people, they want to rub shoulders with Bitcoiners like all the time. And me, I feel like I want to orange pill people all the time, and I also really I care more about the environment that I'm in, I want to jump in waterfalls. I want to go in certain rivers. I like the weather. I like the birds. I like the trees. these are things that, when you live somewhere matter. Um, I personally, not such a social person. I don't want to go to the city every weekend and go out with friends and what I like. That doesn't mean anything for me. I want to see people once in a while and see what they've been working on, talk to them, have interesting conversation, have a dinner, go out, whatever, have some drinks. But every weekend just to talk shit, like that's not important for me. That's not I like I never, even when I live in a city, I wouldn't do that, you know. I'm not a city person. But yeah, I mean, another thing I think is overlooked with the Citadel building and how much money you need is if you can Airbnb, for example, can create some little, eco sort of like getaways and show people, yeah, like if you're ranching, like show people, hey, like I'm rotationally grazing, I'm making my own meat, you know, or like, hey, like I'm growing all this other stuff, like, and so that's part of what I want to do as well. Um, I'm hoping to expand a little bit over here over the years and do that as well. So Bitcoin and ecotourism, that's kind of something that's untapped.
Yeah.
Not to steal untapped growth branding.
You just got to change it a little bit. That's funny. Yeah, the location, I forgot how you said it, ecological location versus, specifically jurisdictional, like government friendly, I think is kind of interesting. Is that kind of what you meant?
Yeah, like if you're gonna build your own citadel, for example, what the fuck do you care so much about the politics? I mean, there is some level where you care, right? There's some real shit that you can get fucked on. But to some degree, like if you're gonna go buy 100 acres, that means you're gonna stay on those 100 acres.
Mm-hmm.
You're not really trying to leave, it depends on how many acres. I only have 2.5, so for me it matters what's happening around me, right? More so than the guy that has 200 acres, right? And I think I've seen online people have varying degrees of what they think is enough for growing for like their homestead, some people say 20 acres. I think there is no number. It's just like, what do you want? Are you trying to be fully self-sufficient, or are you trying to be part of a mesh to or both, right? You always want to be self-sufficient and part of a mesh to right? That's kind of like what a lot of people say. I think I can be self-sufficient on 2.5 acres for the most part, like if shit hit the fan. My neighbors have rotationally grazing cows. Like when I take my bike out, like I take three pedals and I see the cows, talk to them every day, and I have like different sets of cow rotational grazing cow operations here, which are tiny. They're small, but they're like big enough for the neighborhood, um but yeah, I have like a chicken coop without any chickens either. I'm gonna get some chickens eventually. I'm gonna trade my neighbor for some ducks and some chickens. And so those are animals I could have on 2.5 acres that make me some compost, like we spoke about, and different things like that. But I think jurisdictionally, I think if enough people go to only one spot, then that spot already has the jurisdictional like arbitrage there. Then I think then that place will for sure be like a mesh to location, right? So people take comfort in just plugging in instead of like rebuilding the wheel, right? And so like that's what I spoke about before, is that like that weight, there's always something to say. It depends who you are and what you can impact. If you can impact a place that doesn't have that ethos, then I think you should maybe go do that, right? Because Bitcoin is inevitable, but it's only inevitable because we're relentless.
Yeah. Yeah, I like one thing I think a lot of people struggle to see is like how different rural America is than urban and suburban America. Like you're talking about, there's a statewide mask mandate, but yet nobody follows it where you're at. And I think when you have people that are more self-sufficient, they're a lot more difficult to corral and control in the same way. And I think that's, really powerful. Like I hate California so much. But I was driving through rural California, and it's a very different feel, than when you get into the cities. And I think even in a place like that, there's definitely a lot of room for growth, and as far as freedom and being able to like build something special for yourself. And I think that's like huge. Like moving out of the city is just such one, it's relieving, You know, it's quieter, the air quality is better, you have more freedom, you don't get stuck in traffic as much. But two, it's just so much harder for anybody to harass you, which I think is good.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely away from people, you know. At 6 in the morning, I have like a concert of birds, literally like an orchestra of birds. It's fucking crazy. I've never like experienced that before on that level, like not in like a jungle or something, you know. Like I'm not in a jungle, but it feels that way. And yeah, my neighbors are pretty based, you know. Um, it's like older people who are based, and like I was like worried about that when I first moved here, but they're based. They don't give a fuck, you know. And like one of my neighbors, he's like 87 years old, and he was like a 30 years in the military, and a lot of retired military people are pretty based, you know. And this guy's one of them, and he's 87 years old, dude, and this dude takes care of his whole property like himself. I see him out there every day, you know, working, cutting the grass, whatever he's doing. And I don't know, man, like that shit motivates me. I see this 80, almost 90-year-old dude, like he's still getting it, you know. I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to be the same, like trying to work with my hands on my whole fucking life. And I think when you have like the want to do this stuff, you also have to have like the mental and bodily fortitude to do it. It's not easy work. Like a lot of people have a shock when they come from the city and they romanticize it, and they saw a couple documentaries and they spoke to some people on Twitter, and they read some books on it. Yeah, but like, have you worked with your hands before? Right? I'm not saying that people can't do it. Of course they can. I've come from the fucking city. I'm not born into labor work. I put myself into that, right? Um, and I sacrificed money and all those things just to be here doing this, right? But I really wanted it. I really fucking want it. And certain days, your body just, you're like, fuck, like I need to get stronger. So like certain days I work 6, 8 hours a day outside, and then I get in the car and I go to the gym. I can work out at home, but I like going to the gym, and I go work out for an hour, and I lift heavy, and I'm just trying to make the work easier, right? And I'm like literally training for something. So that's another thing to take into account, like, you know, your body, right? How can you use it? Like you have manpower. We're not meant to sit behind a chair the whole fucking day, except for if we're shit posting on Bitcoin Twitter. That's the only thing that's actually productive. But you know, like you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to take a finance job and work 18 hours a day producing nothing. Like what the fuck are you doing in that job, producing absolutely nothing? And trust me, I know that job. I was offered many of those jobs, and my friends work in those, you know, trad finance places. And it's a hell. It's hell. And they're not doing anything. They're just looking to make enough money to buy their huge fucking house, to get their really good looking wife or whatever, you know, like whatever they're doing, you know, and car, and none of those things matter to me. So I think just getting your hands dirty is like the first step. Go volunteer somewhere on a farm. Go go pull up to Untapped Growth. Go talk to him and say, hey, you need some help? I want to go up there to him in Virginia. I was supposed to help him one day. I just like, I've had so much going on over here. I haven't been able to leave it. You know, I'm just building my shit up. But I definitely want to go and help him one day and just talk to him. I've talked to him once in person. Really great dude. I just want to go see what I just want to go see him and hang out. But different things like that. Like when you get your place more together, I'd love to come visit. Um, I just was on another podcast with Andrew Howard. He also is, yeah, he's also like, you know, in Mexico doing his thing, also trying to get a Citadel started. And I would love to just like come to each place, and like, you don't know what rubs off, like, oh hey, I see that you're doing it this way, but I have a better way of spreading compost or spreading mulch, or hey, I see you using this fencing, but Untapped Growth uses this, like, or hey, like, you know, there's so many different things that can rub off on each other, so many different synergies of information that you never know if you've been looking at it the right way. And also just a helping hand, man. Like, you know, back in the day when you had a huge harvest, your neighbors would all come and help you, you know, and then when they had a huge harvest, you'd go and help them, right? And that is the message. Like, hey, you need help? I got you, bro. And like those are the vacations I'm looking at taking. like still working, you know. Um, but yeah, getting your hands, you know, getting ready to get beat the fuck up. That's something that you know, Untap grew up like that, I think. I think he grew up like, you know, in the country. So his hands are country. Like there's a difference, you know. The city hands are slick and smooth and the country hands have the callus, you know. And yeah, man, like I just moved mulch for 2 days straight with my hands. And like I love it because I feel like I'm building all this muscle and I love to do it. But dude, go move mulch for like 15 hours, you know? It's like you need to rest, you need to figure that out too, not get injured, you know. Um, a lot of things that people don't take into account, I think, when they're thinking about going growing their food and like managing land and like using machetes or whatever, brush cutters or, you know, goats, you know, to cut grass, you know, to eat grass. But you know, there's so many different aspects to this that you can have so much fun with it and you can do whatever you want. And if you fail, guess what? It doesn't fucking matter. You just do it again, you know, you just figure it out. And it's just problem solving all day. That's all it is. Right. And you said you just started, right? So tell me about what you're doing.
Well, I started with compost. I've got a few projects in the works. So the first one is I've been out building a chicken coop. Uh, and
So tell me about your compost, for example, like, and tell me about how big of an area you're working on, or if you can, or
it's pretty small right now. We're just starting out with uh, like food waste that we have right now. Uh, so stuff that we haven't, you know, cooked or seasoned, vegetables and stuff like that, coffee grounds, random stuff that we have like that. So it's pretty small for the time being, and we're looking at different ways to grow it and make it a little bit more feasible. And then so that's like the first project is that in the chicken coop. Like once we get the chicken coop going, that's going to be like a good amount of like um I forgot what, like sawdust shavings or something like that you put in the bottom of the coop and it mixed with their poop. That'll clean it out like once a month, and that'll be a good amount of compost. Um, Project after that is getting rainwater, harvesting rainwater as much as possible because
yeah, where you're at, that's an imperative, huh?
mm-hmm. Yeah, we have access to well water, but I think collecting rainwater would be just generally a good thing. And so, you know, I've been researching we would have to like install a gutter system on the house. And you know, it'd be a fair amount of work to do something like that. But you know, there's some cool people like what you're talking about. It's fun to get out in these different communities. We have a friend that harvests rainwater and has like a pool inside of his house that is about 8 feet deep, and it operates as like a air conditioning system almost, which I think is, you know, it's amazing. And you know, he's doing things like has a wood stove to heat the house in the winter, versus my house almost blew up this morning from the gas guy, and so that seems pretty attractive to do something like that instead.
Well, you made it.
We made it. It would have been a very interesting morning if my house blew up.
Yeah, yeah. I have the fire powered stove that heats the house too. I have obviously my air conditioner can heat the house. I use both.
Yeah.
I use the wood stove to like take the pressure off the AC. But it's awesome, man. So wait, so you just take your food scraps and you throw them in a pile. You mix them with leaves. Like, how are you composting? Mix them with leaves.
Yeah, we've got some leaves too, from around, and yeah,
Your grass. You like you have a lawn that you mow.
we do have like sort of desert grass that I haven't been incorporating yet, because it's tied in with these giant desert weeds, so it's a little bit harder to kind of separate them. I wasn't wanting to mix them.
I don't separate my weeds,
Oh, really?
but it comes with a caveat. I make sure that the pile gets to 140 degrees twice. have these
Okay.
steps. So, if you have a big enough pile, then I would compost everything,
Yeah. How, how,
everything.
how do you heat it?
So the bigger the pile, the bigger your compost pile, the hotter it's going to get, no matter what you do. Okay. So, but then obviously you want to have a good balance of browns and greens. Okay. So I use wood chips, leaves. My neighbors think I'm crazy. I like take all their leaves. Like anyone who's like, oh, I see bags of leaves when I'm driving by with my pickup truck, I'll stop and take it. If I see like cut down trees, I'll stop, take it, because I'm going to do a bunch of hugelkultur. I don't know if you know what that is, but
Mm-mm.
so hugelkultur is actually a fucking amazing German idea of like using felled trees and logs without having to chip them, right? So basically, you just stack up the logs, biggest on the bottom, fresh logs, um, so they take a long time to break down, or fresh early logs. You don't want something that's going to quickly break down, because that'll actually like interrupt some of the biology in the soil for a little while. It'll add to the soil, but if you try to grow vegetables or fruits or whatever fruit trees on it, it'll stunt the growth for a little while. So you want something that breaks down slowly. So you take fresh logs, big ones on the bottom, and then in between each layer of logs, essentially you're putting cut grass and compost,
Hmm.
and then you just build it up into like a huge mound. I mean, it's some of them go like 5 feet tall, and they're these huge mounds, and you plant in 100% of the surface area on the sides too. So you make like there's different designs. There's the round ones, and then there's like the slanted ones. And so you're literally planting at an angle, and this whole thing just ends up decomposing into the ground slowly. But you never have to fertilize. It's like fertilized from the beginning, with the wood and the compost and the grass all on the inside. You know, it's a long-term way of growing. So like, for example, strawberries grow amazing in that scenario. Certain things are just like, it's like perfect for. And then because strawberries also replant themselves. So like they send out little shooters, and I don't know if you've ever seen that either, but they literally, like, if you plant one strawberry plant, it'll take over like the whole bed essentially if you let it, because that one will plant one, and then that one will plant two more, and then um and so hugelkultur is basically that. So I just like, when people have like they prune their trees, or next to my gym they cut down like 8 trees. I'm like, hey, can I take this stuff? They're like, sure, you know. But then they were like, what the fuck are you going to use it for? Like, we're curious. And I'm like, hugelkultur. And so I'm here like if I literally in the middle of the night, I'll pull up on that, I'll take it. And so that's interesting. But yeah, there's in terms of the compost, so yeah, just like, just make it huge, and just every layer of browns you just wet it. So you make it like, you just make the surface area large and the height large. And when I say large, I mean like, 4 feet by 4 feet, 3 feet by 3 feet, something like that. I've done like 6 foot, 6.5 foot high piles, just for fun. I just like made one huge pile, because when the piles get smaller, sometimes I'll just put it all together, like when it gets closer to the winter, um, just to keep it going, the inside going. But what I have been doing is I've been taking that compost and feeding it to the worms,
Hmm.
and then using the worm castings, harvesting the worm castings at the end, which is my favorite. I think just like having that cycle, just taking the compost and then moving it to the worms, and taking the worm compost and then applying that to the farm. And obviously, if I need, I plan on mixing the worm castings with some more basic compost, which is from the wood chips breaking down, essentially, which is called like Johnson Sioux compost. Lots of stuff, man. Permaculture is like so many things coming at you, but the Johnson Sioux compost essentially stays at 140 degrees for a while, because it's just a huge pile of wood chips that just you maintain like air holes through it and moisture. And so instead of 2 years it takes to break down, it breaks down in 1 year.
Hmm.
And then that's like amazing compost, because that's like fungal dominant compost. Because the first thing that breaks down wood chips is fungal activity. It's mushrooms. So for example, in my 1-year-old mulch pile, I have a video that I'm about to post. It has so many different types of mushrooms growing out of it right now. Like maybe like 5, 6 different types of mushrooms growing out of it right now. And so
Any fun ones?
I didn't identify them yet. Actually, I need to figure out how to identify mushrooms better. I have this app, um, but I need to use it more, just to like look. I need to. It's one of my goals to like forage mushrooms this year,
Yeah.
this upcoming year. But yeah, just like seeing that, you're kind of like, wow, like this is a lot of fungal activity. Well, dude, after 24 hours of your of your mulch pile sitting there, there's already fungal network that's holding it all together. Within 24 hours, there's strands of mycelium holding this whole pile together, which is like fucking insane. It's so fast, right? And that mimics like the forest floor soil, right? Which is like amazing soil, you know? Ever go into a forest, take a bunch of soil in your hand and smell it? It
Sure.
smells like fresh air. It doesn't smell like anything, right? Well, my compost smells like fresh air. It smells like amazing, you know? The worm compost smells amazing. This Johnson Sioux style compost smells amazing. And it just like has this like forest feel to it. So I'm just trying to like promote that fungal network in my soil, you know? But yeah, it's awesome to hear that you're getting the chickens done with the sawdust. Essentially, it's just you can also feed them all your food, a lot of food scraps as well.
Yeah.
And you can also like if you have a wood chip pile, if you get a wood chip pile delivered, so to get a wood chips delivered, you can just call tree service providers near you and tell them, hey, like come drop them off by me. One of them will eventually do it for you. Just tell them what you're doing with it. Hey, I'm just trying to grow my own food and I need some wood chips, you know? And you can also feed the chickens like on the wood chip pile. You can like put their food on the pile and then they'll come and shit all over it. And just keep doing that. That works fucking amazing as well. Like I put one of my mulch piles right by the chicken coop so that next year when I get the ducks and the chickens going, I can just feed them right on it. So
That's
that's
awesome.
one thing I think about. I know I went off on a tangent there, but lots to talk about and share. And I'm
Yeah.
after my first coffee, so I'm
Yeah. I
ready to go
mean,
now.
and I think this is where it becomes intimidating for people, is uh, just how much there is to learn and grow. And I think what it comes down to is we just have to take it step by step and just be consistent with it. Or at least that's the way I'm trying to approach it.
Yeah. So like for example, like you want to make as much compost as you can, right, for yourself without buying it.
Yeah.
Right. So I just hit you with like every approach almost. Right. So let's say you have animals, you take their shit, you got the worm castings going, you got static piles, which are just wood chip piles that are breaking down, right? That you're not flipping. Then you have all the grass you cut, mix it with the leaves, mix it with the food scraps, put that into huge piles, and then 140 degrees dips down to 100, you flip it, goes back to 100. You just literally turn the pile
Mhm.
and add some moisture. You just add moisture as you see fit. Really simple. You just take a hose, keep it running, you know, and just add the moisture as you see fit, and just flip the pile. It goes back to 140 degrees. Um, you know, that's 4 ways of making compost, and you just attack that all at the same time, right? And you're making like a bunch of fertility there, and it's not so daunting. You're attacking a single issue of fertility with as many different angles as you can. The last angle that I didn't speak about is like making your own liquid fertilizers, which I'm testing right now. Um, but I'm testing it with comfrey, and comfrey is a plant that everybody should have. Like every fucking person should be growing comfrey, in my opinion, that wants a citadel. It's a multi-use super plant that you add to your compost piles. Like for example, your food scraps, you could take some comfrey leaves, throw it in there, I feed it to my worms, for example. Yeah, definitely on the citadel style of living, you got to attack every problem from many angles. So
Yeah. I've never even heard of comfrey. I just looked it up and added it to my list.
yeah, so Bocking 14 comfrey is the comfrey that's sterile, because the non-sterile version will spread all over your farm, and sometimes it's unwanted, sometimes it's wanted. For me, it's unwanted, for now at least. So the Bocking 14, the only way that it'll propagate is when you pull it out of the ground and you chop up the roots into pieces, right? Which is also how you'll receive it. So you can order Bocking 14 root cuttings from different places on the internet. I bought mine from Etsy actually, and they worked great. So and then every year you can pull it out and chop it up into like 20 to 30 pieces and then replant them. So you go like 30x after 1 year, right? Um, so what you start with, you kind of think like, okay, like I'll spend this much money on comfrey this year, and the next year I should have at least 10 times minimum
Yeah.
that I'm replanting, right? And you literally just pull it out of the ground and cut the roots up, right, and replant it. But I use that for in all my compost piles. I chop it up and feed it to my worms because they absolutely love it. And I read online that some worm populations can see up to a 400% increase in the same size. So in the same volume that you were housing the worms, just feeding them a lot of comfrey can increase their population by up to 400%.
Hmm.
And comfrey has like this effect on everything. It's fucking insane plant. Like you start reading about comfrey, it's like comfrey within itself is a rabbit hole. Like people have written whole books on comfrey. Um, and for example, I just planted one root cutting into a mulch pile that's been cooling down a little. I did it on the little risky side, but it was just one cutting, so I didn't care. And so let's see if that, because like the root system of the comfrey is insane, in fucking sane. And so I'm also going to line all my walkways in the garden with comfrey to hold the edge. And also because I use comfrey as mulch as well. So when I'm going to certain beds, you want to mulch with comfrey and then maybe wood chips on top. But yeah, I want comfrey all over. It's just free. It's my main like green manure. You know what I mean? Um, yeah, so many things, dude. Comfrey is just like one of those super. There's a couple of them, but I comfrey. There's a sterile version, and I just can use it for so many things, man.
Nice.
Like you can even use it like to make salves and stuff and different things for your body, and yeah, powerful shit.
Why do you think it's so important to get away from like store-bought fertilizers?
Yeah, so when I was 18 years old, I moved to Cali to grow some cannabis. And it hit me then. I was like growing like a good amount of cannabis, and I was like using all these nutrients that they sell you at the garden store, and I'm like, what the fuck is this shit? You know? And I was like, no way, it just feels wrong. It just feels synthetic. It just feels like you're cutting some corners or something, right? And when I grow cannabis with just amazing soil, the smell, the taste, the high, everything changes, right? Same with the food. So with the food, what's the indicator? What's the indicator that you're doing something right for your food? Is it yield? No. So what is it? It's flavor, right? Flavor is the biggest indicator that you're eating something that's high quality, right? Like you rarely ever have some fucking chemical laden stuff that you're like, oh my God, the flavor of this fucking pesticide ridden tomatoes and no, it tastes like water. So I grow everything for flavor, right? And the only way to generate that flavor is through a complex system of healthy soil. And so all these like concentrated fertilizers are essentially cutting corners. I don't see like a new wave is like buying mycorrhizal fungi. And so mycorrhizal fungi essentially like when you grow like anything, roots go into the ground, right? And then around the roots mycorrhizal fungi develop around the roots, right? And that fungi helps the roots interact with all the nutrients around it, and it helps transfer the nutrients to the roots, right? Mycorrhizal fungi also allows the plants to communicate, certain plants to communicate with each other, like trees and stuff, right? And trees just they talk to each other through fungal networks, right? But the mycorrhizal fungi isn't like it protects the root systems of your vegetables and crops in general, and it also like transfers nutrients to them, certain nutrients to them. So you can see there's like a whole industry around developing mycorrhizal fungi. But this is high time preference stuff. I'm not saying what to do, but I just take wood chips and I mulch, and I use wood chips in my walkways, and over time the fungal network is just developing, right? And as I do crop rotations and stuff like that, the mycorrhizal fungi is just there naturally. I don't need to buy it, right? But I don't have large monocrops of fucking corn or whatever. But yeah, I'm super against these store fertilizers because basically it's an industrial product. I don't even use in my potting soil perlite or any of this garbage, coconut coir. It's just industrial, right? So the problem isn't the product itself. If you take coconuts and you make coconut coir yourself, that's not an industrial product. That you made your coconut coir that you wanted, for your potting soil or whatever. Everything industrial, man. You go there and you see how they make it, and you're like, maybe I'm not going to use that. What am I using that for? That's devoid of anything. Like everything that goes into your soil should be adding to it. It shouldn't just be this like stopgap high time preference thing, you know? Like if you need more aeration in your soil, you need to mulch better. You need to attract more earthworms. You need to put thicker layers of compost. It's on you, you know? If you want to cut corners, yeah, you'll have good results. You'll be able to take pictures of it, share it with your friends. You'll have a little bit more crop that year. But in 10 years from now, I'm going to be developing some crazy yields, some amazing flavor, and my pest management is going to be integrated into the system already. You're going to be like, oh, but what do you do when you get these mites? I don't get those mites. You know what I mean? Like, and so a lot of people, they want the high time preference, but then when it comes 10 years later, they're not actually generating that compound, that CAGR, that compound growth rate of soil fertility that you're building over time. You know, the soil food web, if you're doing it right, you're building this topsoil over time. If you go and take a shovel and you start digging into people's soil, you'll see the topsoil is like, it's like an inch, 2 inches, right? You go to a place that's been no-till, cover cropping stuff, you know, which is something we didn't talk about, but just somebody who has a real system, low time preference, man, their topsoil can be like this, like, you know. So yeah, I'm building real soil, high yielding crops for no reason, like just because I buy, and those inputs also can put you out of business, right? Like you have to buy those inputs from somewhere. So a lot of like traditional farms, they went out of business. You know, Untapped Growth went on the John Vallis podcast and they spoke about their old, I think it was a dairy that they went out of business because they went with the large buyers and the go big or go home method, right? Which is never the case to be true. The truth is keep your expenses extremely low and maximize your profit margin as a small producer. It's 100% of the time. I don't care what business you're in. That's if you're going to be small, you're not going to be the biggest, and you shouldn't compete on that level because you will go out of business. Yeah. Right. And so if I'm not buying anything and I have a bad weather year, doesn't matter how good your fertilizer is. If I get flooded, if my whole field gets flooded one year, you know, then I lose everything. Now imagine I have finance tractor. I don't have these things, but just imagine, right? Finance tractor. I have to buy all my inputs because that's what I'm used to doing. Well, man, you know how much compost you need to start a 1 acre vegetable farm? It's like $30,000 for a good compost, you know, 20 to maybe now it's more expensive, right? After all this inflation and gas prices going up and stuff, like, and I'm talking about enough compost to have like a nice thick initial layer, right? And so, and every few years you're gonna have a thick layer added, right? I'm gonna add layers every year that are nice and thick because I'm making my own stuff. But this is, imagine I'm making it myself for free, right? Just my time and my body power. So that's minimum like around $30,000 worth of sats that I'm stacking, right? And that's how I've been able to keep my Bitcoin and not sell any of it also. So that's something to take into account, that all the money that you bring in is basically going to be savings, you know, and you don't need to be the biggest, you don't need to have the biggest money-making operation. You just want it to never go bankrupt, right? That's like the whole concept of resilience, right? And yeah, I'm sure most people when they buy Citadels, they're not trying to spend their Bitcoin. So they will finance it, right? They will take on some mortgage or some sort of fiat debt to pay down over time as Bitcoin rises and their Citadel increases in value, right? So I think just not relying on anything that's important from the outside is like the feature of a real sustainable Citadel. But if your neighbors provide you something that doesn't count as like an outside source, that's just a mesh Citadel, that's trade, that's and the whole thing I think that people forget is that you're not trying to be 100% self-sufficient actually right away. It's not going to happen. Rome was never built in a day. It's going to take you years. Like there's no fucking way you become 100% self-sufficient in 1 year, you know? If all you're eating is meat, fine. Sure. You know, but not many people want to go 100% carnivore, like 100%. Like you need to have some potato. There's some things that you're going to want some variety. Like, you know, putting tomatoes on a toast, like, I don't know, like for me, that's like, I need to have it. And so when you think in those terms, you just want to trade from a position of power. not a position of weakness. A position of weakness is me buying everything at a farmer's market with bucks, right? A position of power is me going to the farmer and being like, hey, I have these potatoes and I like their carrots, let's trade. Or hey, I have the seed, let's trade seed for seed, you know? That's a position of power, right? And or hey man, I heard you make the best worm castings in the area, let me get some, you know? Or hey, like help me start a vermicomposting operation on my farm, no problem, you know? Like those are the things that people aren't paying attention to enough, I think, is the ability to just trade with something else than just money, right? And even Bitcoin, like I don't want to trade with Bitcoin if I don't have to. If I have to, I do want to trade only in Bitcoin, right? But if I don't, I want to be able to just like give the things that I produce the value and keep my Bitcoin for later, right?
Sure.
So um yeah, that's why I'm against those fertilizers, because they actually don't promote soil biology, and that's what I'm doing. I'm just a biologist essentially.
Yeah, kind of going back to what you're saying. So I got to sit through one of Untap Growth's presentations at a conference a few months back, and he talked about the topsoil erosion and how that could lead to kind of a cascading crisis agriculturally. Um, and it comes back to what you're talking about is time preference. You're talking about doing these things over a period of years, if not decades, versus like, how do I generate the most yield in the short term? And I think that's, very different kind of way to view things than, the average person today. It's almost counterintuitive in our society to have a low time preference, to be thinking that long term. And it's amazing to see how Bitcoin changes that for people.
Yeah, so for me, I was trying to do this before I was a Bitcoiner, right? I just saw the marriage of the two as being a perfect combination, right? And like I said in the beginning, it's like you're saying, like Bitcoin just provides people with that feeling of low time preference to an nth degree, right? And Bitcoin did even my time preference is really low, okay, but Bitcoin lowered it even more somehow, which like I don't live alone, man. I have a girlfriend, like been together for a little bit now, and sometimes, I have to higher my time preference a little bit, but actually it's lowered her time preference, right? Completely. Like in between permaculture and Bitcoin, like it's her time preference is so different than what it used to be. And just having that dynamic also, I know it's super hard for Bitcoiners to talk about all the time, like, hey, how am I going to find a girl? Aren't first of all, there aren't many female Bitcoiners, right? And I think it's like an orange pill scenario. You fall in love with a girl, who cares about, like, I don't really care if somebody's going to agree with me right from the beginning. I just care that our values, our ethos on the base level are shared, because then I know she's going to become a Bitcoiner eventually or whatever. She's going to understand, like, honest, any honest person will understand that everything else is an infinity scam, and Bitcoin is like the most honest form of money ever created, right? It's like any honest person will eventually figure that out. And think about you and me. We didn't start off with that knowledge from step one, or at least I didn't. I was like going down the rabbit hole of shit coins and Bitcoin and all this stuff, reading, and then it clicked, right? And so yeah, it's just super important to have that low time preference for me, even in relationships, which is something that we don't speak about enough either. Because if you're really like the right person for someone, they will listen to you, like if they really listen to you as a person, they'll listen to you, there will be some shared ideology there, so
Yeah, I think the value set is very, very important for the relationships. Like my girlfriend and I, we have very different interests, but she was willing to move out of the city with me to kind of go on this, endeavor. She's the type of person that is into kind of like woo woo stuff, and I'm not as much. Not that I have any judgment against that, but it's just it's funny to see that, because like on the surface of, like, as far as things that are suggested, I think we tend to are suggested to look for the wrong things. And I think the value set, like, you're out there doing something that is, pretty radical culturally. A lot of people would look at the stuff you're doing like, oh, you're actually working with your hands in the dirt, or like you pick up handfuls of dirt and smell it and enjoy it, like, you know and so
I make people do that, man. When I have like a real like city motherfucker like here, I'm like, hey, like pick that up and smell it. And
yeah.
I'm not touching that. I'm like, I pick it up and I smell it and I squeeze it and I'm like, do that. And they're like, I was like, look, smell it. Like, and they're like, wow, it smells good. And I'm like, yeah, now you do it. And they do it and they're like, damn, like, and you can just see like their whole brain chemistry is like, what the fuck am I doing right now? But then after they're like, man, I'm really like detached from nature, huh? Like I don't even want to touch nature. Like what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
And it's like somebody said that to me and it blew my brains. I was like, yeah, dude, like that's definitely an awakening.
Yeah.
You got to be able, when I see people like, hey, so like, where are my gloves? I'm like, dude, what the fuck do you think is gonna happen to you here? Like, you're gonna put your hands into some soil. Like gloves, like you don't even feel anything. Like, how do you work with gloves? Like, I don't understand how gardeners work with gloves outside of like yanking out like thorny things. Um, Obviously, you're in rose bush or something. Thorns. I don't sometimes because I'm just a stupid. I like to. I don't know why. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna go get them, and I'll pick out some thorny shit, or I'll go berry hunting, and all the thorns are grabbing all over me. And um, yeah, that's another rabbit hole, by the way. When you go pick your citadel, you should download this app called Picture This, and like take a picture of certain thorny things. They could be wild black raspberries, wine berries, blackberries. You know, around my whole, I take my bike in berry season, and I just take a jar with me, and I just start taking berries from the side of the road. Nobody takes them, and they're like the best berries you'll ever have. So there's certain free things, like I certain free food crops that are amazing.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, I think it comes down to like you can experience a lot of freedom when you get out of the mass psychosis groupthink that's happening in our society right now, of like, being able to see those things that, other people don't know that exist. Um, I think that's it's been incredibly important for me, for sure.
Yeah, it's been incredible. It's honestly, this whole COVID thing has been kind of incredulous for me, because I've been on this like, hey, let's maybe grow our own food propaganda since like 2016 or something like that, 2015, 2016. And people used to look at me like I'm crazy. And COVID hits, and I get phone calls, and they're like, okay, you're not so crazy anymore, you know? And I'm like, I never have been, you know? I've just been awake for longer than you have. That's it. Like, or slightly more awake, let's say, even. Um, and I think it's just that slight distrust of whatever they're doing, right? They're in such a comfort zone that it just takes a little pin to pop that bubble. And that's what I'm here for, man. Like, when I'm at normies dinners, like I don't mince my words. And for some reason they like, I'm sitting at the table quiet as fuck, eating my food, whatever. And people are like, hey man, so like tell us more about what you're doing. Like the interest now is before it would be to like kind of like mock me a little bit. So like they'd be like, hey man, tell us what you're doing. And I like tell them, and then they're like, yeah, like you're crazy. And I'm like, all right. And now it's like, tell me more. Okay. Oh my God, that's amazing, man. You're doing something Oh, okay. Like, and I'm open. I understand. Like, I don't hold it against them. I never really developed too much salt for them, for the normies, but um, I think there's an awakening happening, man. And I think you see that like this 2021, 2020 horde of Bitcoin maximalists that are coming up online, or you see just a massive jump. And, you know, I think just the amount of information and community around Bitcoin right now is incredible.
Yeah.
There's no other community like it. Like there just isn't. I'm proud to be here, sitting time talking to you about this stuff, man, because it's important. And I think, yeah, like you said, I'll be doing this my whole life. It's not just like a fad or anything. You know, I spent already 5 years just learning and amassing some capital to like do this. You know, shout out Bitcoin for helping me. But you know, we're all connected, man. We're all connected through this unit of account that we're all helping to, you know, increase its value, right, and its purchasing power. And you know, we're all our success is tied to each other, right? We literally have a daisy chain of success, and we're all connected. Um, and that's why we have this sort of bond. Like me and you have never met, but we've spoken a few times on Bitcoin Kindergarten. Shout out Bitcoin Kindergarten, by the way.
Great show.
Yeah, shout out Simply Bitcoin also. Um, but yeah, and you're like, hey, like let's jump and talk for an hour. And I was like, let's do it. But I just feel comfortable talking to you. Like other podcasts, I say no, you know. I'm like, I'm not trying to come on some fiat podcasts all the time. But you know, every Bitcoiner that asks me, I say yeah. And I've been on a couple now. I'm starting to get a little more comfortable being recorded and being on camera. But Bitcoin Kindergarten got me more comfortable with that stuff too.
Yeah, those guys are great. Yeah, I think it's cool to see this become a cultural movement. And, you know, looking at Bitcoin, like I came in pretty late, relatively speaking, of like coming not super late. A lot of people say I was early, but what I mean is like there'd been so much groundwork laid for somebody like me to be able to come in and kind of understand what was going on. And I just think about these people that, you know, really trailblazed and got in early, you know, setting the environment for others to come in, and how, you know, really grateful I am for them. Of like, you know, they were the people going to the parties talking about Bitcoin, and people would look at them and laugh and be like, oh, you know, that weird funny money. And then today, like, it's shifting a lot where we have a country that is using Bitcoin. We've got massive companies buying Bitcoin. It's dominating the news now. Bitcoin may be the cause for a financial implosion, supposedly.
No, never, never, man. It's interesting. I saw that yesterday that Bank of England said that Bitcoin is the cause of the next financial meltdown or something like that. And I saw some Bitcoiners kind of run with that narrative of some memes. Never, man. It's impossible. It's impossible that Bitcoin, and they're like, oh, Bitcoin accelerates the demise of the financial system. That's impossible also. It's an impossibility. Bitcoin only generates prosperity, not despair.
Mm-hmm.
If everyone were to switch to Bitcoin tomorrow, everyone would experience prosperity, not despair.
Yep.
Okay, would the central bank implode? Sure. But would we experience prosperity or despair, which is essentially what we're talking about? We would experience prosperity, because that is literally the theory of hard money, right? The hardened theory of hard money, because it's like more than a theory at this point, right? It's been experimented on. We have a lot of data on it. You know, gold didn't exist for 1 year, or 2 years, or 10 years even, right? And Bitcoin is just the saleable, you know, scarce version of that, you know. It generates prosperity, not despair. The only thing that can lead to a meltdown of anything is itself,
Mm-hmm.
right? The only thing that can happen to Bitcoin is it not producing the next block.
Yep.
The only thing that the central bank can do to stop a meltdown is to stop printing money, which they can't, because that will itself cause a meltdown for them, because they've gotten to themselves into a catch 22. Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yep.
So they're accelerating their own demise. You know, is Bitcoin there so they printed trillions of dollars in the last 2 years? No. Does Bitcoin provide a backstop and an opportunity and a lifeboat? Sure. But prosperity, not despair, every time.
Yeah.
I think the world has to go to shit for people to accept Bitcoin on some level, because then their worldview is comfort, and nobody changes things from a comfortable place, really, right? Like you can't expect some cantillionaire, super millionaire, you know, to just like immediately embrace Bitcoin, right? On average, there will be one or two, right? There'll be a Michael Saylor who's like, okay, like fuck this shit, like this is the truth, you know. but you know, people usually don't make, like, as a society, we don't make huge changes out of comfort. We make it out of discomfort,
Mhm.
right, and out of distrust. And I do believe the world had to go to shit on its own for Bitcoin to gain this popularity. But I also believe that to be inevitable, right? The way that it's set up, everyone who was talking about, like, you know, the food system, who was talking about, I'm sure Untapped Growth, he was like, wow, Bitcoiners, wow, like the food system, like that for sure was like all one journey for him, just like me, you know. Um, and certain other people that I've met that are thinking the same way. Um, but I just see the focus, like you said, on that is just it's inspiring. It inspires me every day.
Yeah. No, I like that. The discomfort leading to growth. I mean, that's just the case always. It's like we're programmed to, or I don't know if programmed would be a good word, but that's just how our brains work, is like we try to be as efficient as possible. And so we avoid discomfort and as much as possible until the discomfort's unavoidable. And we're getting to that point financially right now.
Yeah, and the people that saw it coming have the higher benefit than the people that didn't. Like with anything, right? Like if you start building your citadel 5 years from now or 10 years from now, maybe that was not ideal. Maybe it was, you know, but you kind of don't know. That's why it's good to like be early, right? People like, oh, like just stack sats. Like who cares if it's going to go down or up? Well, because you just kind of want to just hedge every position all the time, right? And I think like the reason why we see the price going to what, like 62,000 almost today, or maybe it hit, you know, we're talking some high number. Um, I think it's because you have the horde of people buying every day. I buy Bitcoin every day. I have an auto DCA going every day. So I just know that I don't have to deal with it. Fiat comes in, fiat goes out. I'm good, you know? And I know I'm just like securing the bag. And when there's bigger dips, I can take like a little like zero interest credit line out and the credit card out, and then stop, you know, start putting my expenses on that and using my, like the fiat, you know, stuff like that. But I think I think without Bitcoin, I would be much more pessimistic on the world. Even if everyone, it's like the more people that grow their own food makes me optimistic. The more people that get into Bitcoin makes me optimistic. So I'm in this situation where, like the theory, I had this theory like 5 years ago that around like this is like my mega bullish theory on people growing food, that around 10 to 15% of the population in the United States will like be growing their own food on some level, you know, or help, or farming as well, just like these like micro farms. Micro farms for me are 20 acres and below. um, and so 15 to 20% of people will be like farming on some level. Even, you know, 100-acre farms are considered small. So um, I'm seeing that play out with Bitcoin at the same time, and maybe 10 to 15% is like the super bullish, too bullish case or whatever, but I don't see it that way. I see maybe like it'll be the similar amount of people that are true Bitcoiners, who are like, you know, Bitcoin maximalists. I think it'll also only be like 10 to 15% of the population on the same time. You know, Skeef thinks, you know, Skeef is somebody who doesn't think everybody's just gonna like use Bitcoin as their unit of account. They're just gonna like hold some and speculate and whatever. But like 15 to 20% of the people using Bitcoin as a unit of account is just fucking powerful, you know? And so yeah, that makes me just so optimistic for the future, man. And just every single person that I hear that's starting to compost for the first time, like you know, this is your first time composting, right?
Mhm.
Like it's your first time actually doing this stuff, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Amazing, you know? Like these are things that I should have been. I'm pissed that I wasn't taught how to compost at a young age. Like, why not? Like, why are my food scraps going into the garbage? Like, like what the fuck? You know what I mean? That's like absolute retardation. You know, um, like you don't do anything for compost. You just dispose it in a certain way. It's like not hard. So many of these things are bullish on Bitcoiners. Long Bitcoin, long Bitcoiners.
Yeah. No, I'm super stoked. That 10 to 15% of the population, if that were to happen, there would be a massive shift. Uh, I mean, even if you get 5% of the population doing this stuff, like that creates a major change. And I think that's all we need in order to move the needle in the direction towards a freer society, because that's if you have 5% of the population that is completely intolerant of the BS that's being shoveled towards us, like you cannot corral these people. You cannot um, even begin to control the narrative, and
You,
especially like
you become ungovernable.
yes,
Ungovernable. I love saying that. Ungovernable. It's like a weird word.
yeah,
I don't know.
and that's
Yeah,
ultimately yeah,
but you also become pandered to. You become a like sort of like a constituency that people will come and say, hey, if I can swing this vote, you know, and so you hold power at 5% for sure,
yeah.
for sure. You know, if there was a third party that got 5% of the vote in presidential elections, like that would change everything. You know, um,
Dave Smith 2024.
yeah, I'm not voting.
I'm not
I'm
either.
not voting. I'm not voting until they pander to me.
Yeah,
So that's my theory. I don't want to vote at all. I don't care if someone says the word Bitcoin or not. Like I'm not voting until they're like I'm sure that they're pandering to like shrinking government. So a politician needs to run on the idea that they're going to shrink government. Now, if they're running on the idea that they're going to, you know, use Bitcoin as a unit of account, so maybe I'll vote for them because that will shrink the size of the government eventually. But um, do you believe politicians? No. That's why like I'm not going to vote until I believe I'm voting in a fair election. Until I believe I'm voting in elections that are fair. I don't care about this whole like media narrative of like miscounted votes and all that stuff. That's all a charade to me. I don't really know what to believe, you know. Do I think elections are fixed? For sure. How they're fixed, who the fuck knows, you know? Um, there's no way for me to verify that you voted and I voted and she voted, and like there's no real good way to verify who voted for what and if they're a real person or not, you know. um I'm waiting. I'm tuning out the noise people trying to talk to me about politics and say, look, I'll talk to you about politics, just know I'm apolitical. And they're like, what does that mean? I'm like, I'm not voting in your election, so I'm just telling you how I see the problem and what I think could fix it, and then you can decide who you want to vote for, but I don't care who you vote for. You know what I mean? Like I apolitical. And this shit that blows their fucking mind, actually. Like someone who's like trying to talk politics to you and you tell them that immediately, they're like, so you're libertarian. You're like, no. I tell them no, I'm apolitical. Even though I fucking am, you know? But I'm just saying, like, I hate it because like now the Libertarian Party is like this like weird target. You know, you have like the Joe Jorgensen, the guy with the boot, the weird fucking hat on his head. You know, like
yeah,
yeah, like you know how the normies think. They see like all these crazy libertarians. You know, I say no, I'm a consent. You know, Jimbo the consensualist on Twitter. You know, he basically reworded voluntarism to consensualism
yeah,
because because consent is very important to normies, right? To everyone, obviously, but to normies, they use the word consent. They don't use the word voluntary, right? And so consensualism is what we're after. So why would I vote for something that's I know that it's not going to be consensual, right?
yeah.
And fuck the police, fuck the politics.
Yeah, you're preaching to me. I'm very in line. The problem with voting is we're we would be going out and competing with the masses of people that are incapable of doing things in their own best interest, where they just buy into whatever the marching orders of what they're told to. And I think this, like the stuff we've been talking about the whole podcast, has been so much more productive and will always be more productive, because it doesn't matter what the maniacs and seated in positions of power, fiat power, think or say, when you've got a group of people that just say no, like we're not going to comply, and you can like try and take things from us, and it's incredibly difficult and expensive for you to do so, because we've got our bases covered, and so there's not very much that you can do, and so we're not changing, you have to change. And I think that's way more productive.
Yeah, we're at odds. If I vote, we're at odds. If you're a government, you want to continue obtaining your salary and your power, and we're at odds. I want to shrink you, you want to grow.
Yeah.
There's nothing that unless I see something that can shrink you, I'm not going to do it, right? So I'm going to buy Bitcoin. I'm going to shrink you. I'm going to shrink you. Like, if I feel like you're an impediment on human prosperity, I'm going to shrink you. You know, if I feel like you're actually like trying to push narratives for people to like stop population growth, like I'm going to shrink you, because I think people should do whatever the fuck they want.
Yeah.
And I think the population size that we can harbor on this planet is much higher than what we're led to believe.
Yep.
Because from my estimates, like I said, if we're 10 to 15% growing our own food, you know, you start to see the abundance that we could have if we just build our soils to be resilient things. And if me and you have, like, right, they say that, you know, one Bitcoiner makes three, because it's like on average people have two kids or something like that, 2.5, right? Like an average household is 2.5 people, right? No, what is it? It's 3.5 people. Sorry, I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah.
Basically, people have around two kids, right? So, you know, every Bitcoiner makes two, right? And so those are two more Bitcoiners that are coming out that are going to be like, they're not going to accept government food and government water. They're used to some high quality lifestyle, right? It's this the highest quality lifestyle, basically, which is like all the food just growing around you. And I think that's why it only takes 10% of the population to really make a shift, because once you get to the third, fourth generation, you know, you have like a 25% of the population, 35% of the population. Even if it just sticks at 15%, because some people still, you know, leak out, you're still creating a sustainable system, which can, a sustainable system isn't one that lasts just for you for 40 years or 50 years. It's one that lasts multiple generations, right? It's one that lasts 100 years, 150, yeah, right? That's a sustainable. So that's what I'm after too. Like, I'm hoping that whatever I build here gets sustained for 100 years.
Yeah. That's
The
beautiful.
goal.
The only way they can stop us is throwing us all in the gulag.
Fuck.
Not gonna let them.
My grandparents are Holocaust survivors, all of them. So hopefully, I don't make it back there.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
That's why when people say, "Oh, like Bitcoin was designed to create a financial collapse," I say, first of all, bullshit. Second of all, allergic to that, because that's what they claimed my grandparents did, which they did not. So, you know, people suffered for me to be here to not make the same mistakes, and I won't.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful, and it's amazing to kind of see people just replicate the very similar narratives and positions with just a little different tinge, like
But that's why keeping your Bitcoin is super important.
mm-hmm.
So you can't just go all in on a citadel. You can't. You need to keep some sovereignty that you can leave. Because look, okay, like I'm building this. I love my place. I have a connection to my place. But man, like I'm not gonna get it. If I have to vote for him with my feet, I will. You know, like if you force me to, like I will. You know, and so stack sats, don't sell sats, right? You got to be a net buyer of satoshis like your whole life, basically. Or a critical mass, and then you just don't touch it, right? Like I don't know, you kind of have to hold on to it as long as possible.
Yeah, and that comes again to the low time preference of thinking, you know, future generations, like, you know, we want our kids and grandkids to have Bitcoin.
I hope my kids and grandkids have Bitcoin. I hope my kids and grandkids have this citadel. I hope my kids and grandkids have it all. You know, I hope they're seeing that full prosperity that we had to eat shit for to build. You know, like if I was already living on a citadel, like, and I just had to add Bitcoin, that'd be easy, right? I'm like, oh, my parents already live in this sort of scenario. I come from a family of farmers or whatever, so it's kind of easier. But a lot of people have to build it from scratch, right? What, like 1% of the population is involved in agriculture or something like that? Maybe it increased a little bit in the last 10 years with all these like small micro farms, but I still think it's like something small as fuck, you know? And so like that's literally how many people are involved in growing food. Like that is fucking crazy small. That is insane. That is an opportunity. And there's so much wasted space. And another reason why I'm doing it in such a small plot is because people have a yard. People have a quarter acre. People have less than that. They should do something with it, not just fucking grass, uniform grass, monoculture grass. Stupid.
Yeah. Well, you definitely changed my mind on something, because I've definitely been the person that like looks at these awful narratives and I'm kind of like stay dumb, you know, as the solution. But listening to you talk, like the stakes are pretty high right now, and we're wading into some pretty dangerous waters as a society. And uh, I, just listening to you talk about like what your family's experience, like it does seem important right now to be fighting these narratives and to not be um uh because where they are willing to take them is an incredibly dangerous place.
Yeah, I mean, we can't we can't let even if it just happens in one country or one town or whatever, we can't let Bitcoiners get hung. You
Yeah,
know, uh, cannot. Like, if there is a place like that, like we need to come down with a hammer, because when you don't and you just say, oh, it's not going to happen to me, well, look at the distance from Germany to Poland. It's not far, but it's still kind of far. And millions of people died in Poland because they kept saying, not it's not going to happen here, you know. And look, it fucking happened. you know my grandparents are Polish, so they survived, but their families didn't. I'm part of the few that are left. And it's stories for most people. It's something they read in a history book. It's something that they didn't live any part of it, but at least I got some primary experience with those people. And yeah, I think it's important that we don't let it I think Bitcoiners are the easy scapegoat, so just like the Jews always have been. I think it's just so easy to look at the people who are prospering when everybody and everything else is crumbling. And trust me, man, like, if things do crumble, Bitcoin's only going to increase in value, and you're going to that's why OPSEC obviously matters. But in the same time, there's a limit to how much OPSEC you're going to have. And they're going to pin the tail on us eventually, right? You see the Bank of England. That's not my narrative. That's not a Bitcoiner's narrative. Like, they put it out there. I can't do anything about that. Like, they own the media. Like, I don't know what else we can do except for just being loud and proud on Twitter, and acting stupid is really important. I think the Think Boys are great, but I think the memesters are better,
yeah,
because you can have 10 Think Boy posts, but you need to have the stupidity, like the Bitcoin kindergarten idea of, like, yeah, we're going to have all the signal and all the smart anecdotes and smart things said, but there's a point where you have to act stupid. Magic internet money.
yeah,
That is a cloak. That's a cloak so you don't get scapegoated. It's a feature. It's a huge feature of the system. It's so that people don't come down on you too early. People don't care about you. It's magic internet money, dude. And I think this is like the most, like, people like Mike Alfred and all these and Udi want to make it like more like corporate or whatever, but you don't want that. You don't want that. You want it to be cloaked in regardation. um, I think so. For security reasons. But I'd rather the price of Bitcoin, and when I say price, I mean purchasing power of Bitcoin, go up. I'd rather go up slowly and steadily all the time, but that's obviously not what brings the price up. We're long volatility, right? Like, you see the most volatile times in Bitcoin is obviously the reason that sends the price up. But I do believe that we need to be like cloaked in stupidity. So
yeah. I mean, we're combating just complete insanity, clown world nonsense. And so I think I'd imagine the stupidity that you're talking about is almost like a parody of how ridiculous this stuff is that's being promoted. Like it, all of this stuff is, but yeah, I mean, just the intolerance of these narratives. Like I think it's important to, you know, get out in the community and talk with normal people that are so easily dissuaded by these narratives so that they can see how false it is, and like, remind them that, like, hey, the government lied to you here. They're at this specific point, they're probably lying to you here too. um and that's huge. I mean, they lie about everything.
I will say though that, like, when I do that with normies, very I'm not respecting their safe space.
Yeah,
Like Laser Hot likes to say, like, there's like normies are safe space maximalists. and they are, and I don't respect it at all. So some people say, hey, you got to change the way you talk about these things if you want to get through to people. And I say, yeah, did I get through to you today? They say, yeah, actually, yeah, you did. I say, so like, why are you telling me how to get through to you? Like, who cares if it's a little bit of like an intense conversation? This stuff should be fucking intense.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be like, okay, you had your 30 seconds to debate this, like, next person, please. No, it's not comfortable. None of this shit's comfortable. I think it's comfortable for me to tell you how fucking wrong you are about everything. Like, not you, Tucson, but like you, the normie, right? Like, it's like, fuck. Like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to come and shit on you technically, but I have to. It's like my duty. Like, I feel like I have to do it. Whether you hate me after or not, I like, I have to do it. Like, I don't know what it is. I like, I can't shut the fuck up. Like, I was at a bachelor party with 100% of the people were from Los Angeles.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, right. And I'm like, I'm gonna have a fucking great time. We're shooting guns, we're off-roading, like we're
Okay.
doing some pretty cool shit, like, and so I'm like, all right, like, we sit around and people start talking about Ethereum, and I'm like, that shit is a fucking scam. And they got butthurt, they got butthurt. They were like, hey, how can you call it a scam? Like, come on, man. Like, they, Mark Cuban, whatever. And I'm like, dude, you guys are not gonna make it, but I'll tell you if you want to know. Like, yeah, we want to know. And then I would put one sentence out, and then they would all start like, just, I don't know, just cutting me off and just talking between each other, and how it's blockchain, not Bitcoin. And I'm like, yeah, so like, tell me about that. Like, what's the purpose of a blockchain? And then we start talking. One guy got super offended though, like super offended. He's like, man, like, I have a lot of money in this stuff and you're shitting on it. And I'm like, yeah, like, who cares? Like, if you're so solid in what you're doing, why are you so butthurt? Like, I don't care what you guys do. I'm trying to help you guys. That's how I look at it. And then when I told him that, he was like, I'm like, look, maybe what I'm saying is true, right? Like, maybe, right? You can't rule it out. So maybe you should just Google exactly those words. Is Ethereum a scam, and why? I'm sure you'll find some stuff, right? And then see then type in, is Bitcoin a scam, and why? And tell me, where is the Bitcoin is a scam going to come from? Jamie Dimon, it's worth nothing. Warren Buffett, Rapoid, all the people who it threatens their business model, essentially, right? But Ethereum, it's like, no, there's actually like, or any sort of shitcoin, there's actually some sort of affinity, security law that they've circumvented and scam people technically, right? Then you have people say, hey, well, how is it a scam if nobody lost money? Well, like, it's a scam because it's an enrichment game. So, it's
Nobody,
crazy. Yeah.
nobody's lost money yet.
Well, people have lost money on shitcoins, just
Oh,
not on Ethereum, right? Not on Ethereum, right? But they've lost in Bitcoin terms. Obviously, when I show them those charts, they kind of like are like, they still don't understand. They don't understand how to look at that, be balanced. But I'm definitely not. I'm definitely a threat to people's like way of life in a sense. When I talk to them, because if they agree with me, that means that whatever they're doing, they disagree with all of a sudden, which is like very hard conversations to have. But I think they're imperative. Like you're saying, we're in a tough spot.
Well, it comes down to like the truth is incredibly important right now because like the stakes are super high. Like we're not in smooth waters, and we're going to be, experiencing a lot of volatility politically, economically, just with basic food supplies going forward. And, do you want to, like, for these people, are we going to be okay with like just putting up with their bullshit and not telling them the truth for them to be, unable to retire, unable to, take care of their families and stuff like that? Or are we going to go through the effort to, tell them the truth? And it doesn't mean trying to, convince anybody, but because like there's some people that just won't be convinced. But like this whole, like, this is why the toxicity saved me from being a shit coiner, where people like actually, called me out, for whatever, because I was ignorant. And I think it's important, because like if they're going to be holding these stupid bags of like Ethereum or Solana or whatever, and these these protocols just do not survive because they're not built to survive. They're, these silly pump and dump scams. It's just, it's really unfortunate. And I think that's why it's important. So I'm totally with you on that, 100%. Wait, yeah, we're on a very similar page, which is cool. As far as like good resources for people to start learning about like being a bit more self-sustainable, what have you found helpful?
There's so many books, but if you're trying to go more so along the lines of using your hands and not so many tools, so you can look at Will Bonzel, which is like radical self-reliant gardening. If you want to go also just learn more about permaculture and systems, you can go to basically the originator of permaculture, not the originator, but like, they call him like the grandfather of permaculture. His name is Bill Mollison. He has his textbook is like super thick. I have it here. It's huge. It's a little bit overwhelming, but the design principles, permaculture is design. Homesteading is design. Self-sufficiency is design. So he has like so many design principles in there for every type of climate almost, right? Because like what works in the tropics doesn't work in the arid, doesn't work in the subtropics or whatever. So there's those two books. There's so many books. Some people recommend, I haven't picked it up, but it's like the Permaculture Handbook, the Gaia Permaculture Handbook, but I haven't read much of that. I really like the idea of whatever your vision is to go look up somebody who is holding your vision and take as much as you can from that person. So if you want to deal with cattle, so I would suggest your best resource might be just talking to Untapped Growth on Twitter. He'll send you some good books. Go on YouTube. YouTube University is a real thing. I really like the idea of Masanobu Fukuoka. It's One Straw Revolution. He's amazing. I don't know if you know who that is, but so Masanobu Fukuoka is part of a lot of people's like starting off journey. His idea is like lazy farming, spending the least amount of time doing it but the most production. And I use a lot of his ethos within the way that I'm building this whole thing out. And I think once it's built and going, I think it'll make a lot of sense on how to like reduce, like a lot of people tell me like a lot of farmers tell me that they weed their potatoes a lot. And I'm like, how? Like, how are you getting weeds? I don't understand. Like, if you're doing it right, there shouldn't be so many weeds after maybe one. I didn't have any weeds in my potatoes, like none. I'm growing it in mulch, but I mean mulch, like I don't. There's certain things that are just like lazy principles that maximize your time. So, Masanobu Fukuoka, there's like the whole documentaries on him, but it's like natural farming, which is basically like it's permaculture essentially, right? But it's like to an extreme. Because agriculture is right intervention with the natural world, but there's so many books, man. There's so many books. I think there's this new book called the New Complete Book of Self-Sufficiency or something. It's like a red cover. I posted the link because you can get a lot of books for free in PDF format before you buy it, just to make sure. And if you get so much out of it, you can always buy a copy and give it to somebody else and support the author. But I don't want to spend sometimes $40 or $30 on a book and before I see it. So there's ways to get some of these books for free. I don't know how to spell his handle, but Rafa, Bitcoin Twitter, Rafa. It's like TXO Paxi. I don't remember how to write his handle. But he has a Dropbox link that I have saved as well of like hundreds of books in PDF and ebook formats. So many, because there's like one book just on comfrey, for example, and I would say that if you really want to learn, come to Twitter, come ask questions to the homesteading and Bitcoin community, people who are doing it, ask questions, be like, just tag people, be like, ask a question and don't be scared. Just tag a bunch of people that you see that are into that stuff and say, hey, I have this fucking question. Everyone will give you an answer, and And so, yeah, read, but also interact. Like, I have a growing list of people that I'm tagging in I'm trying to do like a once a week or once every 2 weeks permaculture post that I tag everybody in that really wants to see something that they might learn something from, right? Not just pictures of my harvest, like, hey, I'm using this for this reason, this is how I'm using it, right? And so anyone who wants to be added to the list, I just say, hey, leave a comment. And I'm just trying to get the conversations going more. People aren't scared to ask questions, right? And I think just don't be intimidated, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's food, whether it's whatever it is. Just ask the questions to the people that you think might have the answer. And if they don't have the answer, they might know who to send you to, right? And I think that's something that I've seen proliferate on Bitcoin Twitter, because yeah, we all share Bitcoin, but then we all come from different backgrounds. Like if I want to know something about timber, like I'm gonna DM Ben Gunn, or I'm gonna talk to him in public, on Twitter. If I want to talk about ranching, I'm going to talk to Untapped Growth. If I want to talk about other things like Bitcoin related specific things like hardware wallets, I might talk to somebody who's has experience with all of them, or most of them. Somebody technical like Laser Hodl, Lamy, whatever. Yeah, that's my piece on it. If you're finding information, look deep and hard. But Will Bonzel, I would say start off with Will Bonzel if you're into the heirloom seed storing and self-reliant gardening.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll have to check all those out. My reading list is so long right now.
Will Bonzel is inspiring though. Like it's really complete, the guide. Like he even covers human manure. Like, I mean, he's been self-sufficient for 40 years. He's a veganic gardener though. He doesn't use animals. So it's good to take, if you have animals, it's good to take someone who doesn't use any and just combine the two, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, really appreciate you coming on, Shishi. This is awesome.
Fuck yeah, Tucson. Anytime, man. And I hope to come on maybe in a year from now and talk to you about all the changes and developments and, progress, and hear what you're doing, see the progress we both have come after a couple of years.
That'd be fantastic. That was an awesome conversation with Shishi. A big thank you for him coming on. Make sure to go follow him on Twitter. But yeah, he brought up some really great points to the conversation. I think this idea of a mesh DAO, of creating these decentralized networks of people voluntarily interacting with each other, is going to be incredibly important in the future, because what we're walking into is just increased volatility, and we have the ability to mitigate some of that volatility, the impact of it in our own lives, by creating networks of people that produce things of value together. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the state hates us. They're going to try and disrupt us. We have to be creative around these things. But freedom is something that is inherent to human beings, and something that they can try as hard as they want to suppress in us, but will fail to. And central planning always fails, and markets always win. And these are things to be incredibly excited about. And we have this incredibly powerful tool in Bitcoin that they cannot stop. They cannot censor our transactions. And if stored correctly, it's very difficult for them to confiscate from us. So these are things that are really, really, really exciting in the face of just insanity, in the face of this clown world that we're in. But yeah, big thank you again for Shishi coming on. Follow him on Twitter, check out his work, shoot him DMs. If you got questions, I'm going to be asking him questions about, home gardening and stuff like that. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and have a good one.